Good evening, everyone. And it's a real something different for me today because I'm actually presenting my talk on the basis of myself being a client for Naturetrek. I went to Brazil on the Just Jaguars tour as a client in June 22. I should have gone a year or two earlier, but I got locked into lockdown like most of us did. And unfortunately, the trip was delayed as a result of that. However, I just want to show you this evening my experience of that tour as a client, and it was fantastic. That's the first word I would like to use. It was absolutely tremendous. So, without further ado, can you see my map, Tom? Just my map?
Yeah, that's great. That's
Great,
great.
thank you. Well, Tom's already told you, given you some idea about where we go on the tour. So obviously, we're the UK. I went via British Airways and spent an overnight in Sao Paulo down here. And then the next day flew up to Cuiabá, which is just where the red dot is here. And the next day started on the tour, which was absolutely fantastic, as I mentioned a minute ago. Excuse me. So here is the beginning of the Transpantaneira, that very long 140-kilometer long dirt track. And this is the entrance, the official entrance. And you're on your four-wheel drive truck at this point. And it's great fun, absolutely exhilarating. In fact, the entire trip was just wonderfully enjoyable. It was one of those trips that you go on and you come back at the end and then you think, crikey, I'd really love to do that immediately, straight again. So that hopefully gives you a bit of an impression about how I found this trip. So here's the beginning of the road, all the way down to the place where we pick up the boat. But before then, of course, as Tom's mentioned, we also make a stop at one of the other lodges going along. So this is the rickety sort of bridge. This one is actually the longest bridge on the Transpantaneira, and it's actually a bit of video I'm going to show you now. I actually walked across it, not because I was a bit worried that the truck would go through, but just to give you a bit of a flavour of the experience. So you've got water on both sides of the bridge here. Now, you're only about 3 or 4 feet above the surface of the water. And as Tom mentioned, although it does look a bit rickety, as you can see here, there is a great experience to go along and drive along this road. But the wildlife is absolutely everywhere on both sides, and you need to keep your eyes peeled the whole time to be. You might miss things. There's just so much to take in. And one of the first things you encounter are the rheas. And this is the greater rhea in amongst a group of termite mounds. There are lots of termites in the drier parts of this part of the world. So that's a fairly easy bird to see because of its size. It's the South American equivalent of an ostrich in many ways. But there are other large birds as well. This one's called the bare-faced curassow. It's a female, this one, and they're often found pottering around some of the lodge grounds. So you've got a reasonable chance of catching up with plenty of these. But because of the geographical location it's actually the largest tropical wetland in the world, the Pantanal. Water birds and birds that are found around water are going to be the more common sightings. So here, for example, this bird is called the black capped Donocobius. They've got some wonderful names, some of these birds in South and Central America. And this one is very fond of sort of reed beds or water plants, or plants are growing along the river, particularly in the Pantanal, not just exclusively there, though. And obviously, Tom mentioned earlier about the toucans, and this is an aracari, though it's a relative of the toucan. This is the chestnut-eared aracari, and this one was actually coming to one of the feeders that had that was being used in the grounds of the lodge. So again, colourful birds almost coming to your veranda, really, in your lodge. So you've got bird activity everywhere. Now, this part of the world is very popular for birds of prey as well. And one of the commoner ones you can find there is this. This is a snail kite. And I don't know if you can make out on this picture, but it's actually holding a snail. There is a species of snail that occurs in the fresh water of the Pantanal called the apple snail. And interestingly enough, it's a very important species, the apple snail, because at different times of the year, there is the wet season and the dry season. And in the dry season, the apple snail is very important at basically munching up all the fallen vegetation which has fallen into the water, and is a very important species from that point of view. But you see the hooked bill on this bird, which is brilliantly evolved as a sharp winkler, if you like, but being able to pull out the flesh from inside the snail. By the way, these are all, not only are they all my photographs you're seeing here, but they're all taken on this one trip. Here's another species of bird of prey. This is the Savannah hawk, another very common bird as we'll go along en route. Here's another one of the Savannah hawks. This one's a young bird. It's actually disemboweling a frog on top of a termite mound there. And they're very common along the routes of the waterways, either from the boat or from the Jeep as we're, or the four-wheel drive vehicle rather, as we're moving along. And probably one of the larger birds of prey to look out for is this. This is the crested caracara, quite a large bird of prey. Scavenges a lot of the time as well. And this one's just perched out on one of the many dried dead branches that occur in this part of the world. And one smaller bird of prey, this is called the bat falcon. Not specifically because it catches bats, it tends to catch a lot of birds that are coming into roost just as it's getting dusk, and also earlier in the morning as they're perhaps leaving roosts and so on. So that's where this bird gets its name from. I always think of it as the sort of South American version of our European hobby, really. Very, very similar in many respects, with the coloration, particularly underneath there. But it's not just falcons and so on. We got owls here too. This is a great horned owl, which is the largest, or one of the largest owls in this part of the world. And we came across this one, just sat out on a branch at dawn one morning, and we were just walking along, and we just heard this call and looked up, and straight above us was this 3-foot tall great horned owl. And another night bird to be found here is this. This is the great potu, the largest of all the potus, and the potus are relatives of the nightjars. And they rely on this fantastic camouflage. In case you didn't know, by the way, it's the one on the left, not the forked tree on the right. But they have this fantastic camouflage, and they sit out during the day, relying on that camouflage to be unnoticed. And you can just make out the eye there on the top of this bird's head. And really got to keep your eyes peeled to try and find one of these. Luckily, our guide found one and got everybody onto it. And these wonderful comical birds, the toucan, for those of you who are old enough might remember the Guinness advert. Well, this is the Guinness bird, the Toko toucan. And yeah, this one does come to one of the lodges, to one of the bird feeders there. Great colorful birds to find. Some smaller birds are obviously as well, and this one's the great kiskadee. It gets its name kiskadee from the call it makes, and you can often pick that call out from the noise of the river or you know, just the background from quite a distance. We've got a very sort of distinctive call. So this is the sort of boat arrangement as Tom made out, and I'll just play a little bit of video just to give you a bit of an idea of this is us cruising along in the boat, looking out or moving from point A to point B to try and find jaguars. This is how we make our way along. And then in the next scene, you'll see us approaching the Flotel, the second of our accommodations on this tour. And it really is a fantastic place to spend some time. It's absolutely idyllic. The important thing in many respects is it's fully air conditioned, and you know, this is quite a tropical area, so by the time you've been out all day, it's really heavenly to come back into somewhere like this with air conditioning and a wonderful setting, as Tom's already made out. And this is what it looks like inside. There's a little bit of a lecture room here. You'll get talks perhaps in the evenings, maybe about anacondas, maybe about the caiman, maybe about jaguars. And a nice little dining room in the back here with a small bar associated with it as well. And this is just a view on a cloudy evening, actually, which was unusual, from my veranda, in fact. So this will give you a bit of a perspective of what to expect when you get there. So kingfishers obviously are fond of water, and as Tom's mentioned, you'll often see them perch quite closely. And this one was actually right next to the Flotel. This is a green kingfisher, a female, perched quite close to the Flotel itself. But as Tom mentioned, we will get other water birds as well. These are large-billed terns at the side of the river as we're going along, and the boatmen will stop when anything other than jaguars perhaps turns up, and you'll sometimes get close to birds like the black skimmer, like Tom was mentioning earlier on. So there is plenty opportunity to stop and see other things as well as the jaguars. So this is a rufescent tiger heron, a juvenile bird just perched at the side of the river. And again, the driver of the boat will stop and let everybody get a good look at these, as well as birds like this one. This is the sunbitten, a very shy and skulking bird, but reasonably common in this part of the world. You just got to keep your eyes peeled, really. And as Tom mentioned, perhaps the largest bird you'll see there is the jabiru. This was actually on one of the nests. It's got a nest rather in one of the lodges that we stay at. And this one's just feeding on a fish that its mate had brought to it. Huge birds, though, over 5 feet tall. And then another sort of bird to find in this neck of the woods is the rufous-tailed jacamar here with its quarter dragonfly. They're relatives of bee-eaters, the jacamars, wonderful birds to find. But as Tom mentioned, one of the spectacular birds to find here is the hyacinth macaw. These were very much threatened with the pet trade industry at one point, but their numbers have really picked up, and the Pantanal is probably one of the best places in the world, well, in Brazil, to see them. You don't get them outside of South America anyway. This one's actually feeding on palms as well. But this was an extraordinary experience. I was photographing this hyacinth macaw, which was trying to get into a nest hole here. And I just pressed the button at the right moment, because in the nest already was a barn owl, a western barn owl. You can see with it. So they came face to face in the nest hole, which was quite a wonderful experience. If you're lucky, you might come across an anaconda. We did, and this was just actually in the grounds of one of the lodges. It wasn't an adult. It was only about 12 feet long, this one. So this is yellow anaconda. But keep your eyes peeled again. Don't just look up, look down as well. Caiman, as Tom mentioned, this is the #1 prey item for the jaguar in this part of the world, jacare caiman, that you can get very, very close to them, especially when you're out on the boat. Luckily for us, they're fish eaters, not human eaters. So, you needn't to be too afraid from that point of view. But again, great animals to see and photograph. Much less common, excuse me, is marsh deer. And this was in the grounds of one of the lodges. It was knee deep in soft waterside vegetation, and beautiful animal just to have in the grounds of the lodge that we were at. And also, as we were cruising along the river, keep a lookout for black howler monkey. This is the female of that species. Plenty of wildlife to see wherever you look. You really do need your camera all the time. Here's another perspective of the capybara, the world's largest rodent. It's about the size of a good-going spaniel. And here's a family party of 3 or 4 of them with a mum there, or presumably mum, might be dad. But also one of the species I particularly wanted to see was giant river otter, in addition to the jaguar, of course. And I was not disappointed. I've been to South America several times before, never seen jaguar, never seen giant river otter. And I thought this was going to be the trip that I would hopefully see both of them. And as you see here, this is the giant river otter, a spectacular animal. Have a very, very high-pitched call, and everybody can usually pick that call out from a reasonable distance. So, they can spend a lot of time underwater, but when they come to the surface, they're very, very social animals and give a lot of calls, and that often gives their presence away. Well, but for me, jaguar was the actual target I particularly wanted to see, and we were not let down. I think we recorded 7 different individuals in my particular trip, and we got fantastic views of them. Here's a group of 3. This is an adult known as Patricia, and 2 very well-grown cubs. And so this was taken from a boat. You don't get off the boat, obviously, because it is a little bit risky, but you are safe in the boat. This just gives you a bit of an idea. There's two people here, one person and somebody else photographing jaguars. That gives you a bit of a perspective of how close you can get to these animals. They're the world's, they got the strongest bite of any cat in the world. And the other thing they got the longest canine teeth of any cat. And the bite is stronger than any other cat, including lion and any other cat you can mention from Africa. And they're also fantastic swimmers. This one's just literally dived after a caiman. It missed it on this occasion, but we did see 2 kills of caiman made during our trip there. So that was a fantastic experience. They took my breath away, though, the jaguars, because having seen lots of cats in Africa, they were just so quick, the jaguars. I couldn't get my camera sorted in time before they jumped in and killed a caiman. It was just unbelievably quick, a wonderful experience. And so that's my perspective on this wonderful trip. And as I mentioned, it would be one I would dearly love to do instantly as soon as I'd finished it, go and do it all again. But as Tom said, things weren't all finished just because we'd finished on the Flotel. On our way back, we stopped off at the other lodge that Tom mentioned and managed to get some views of this ocelot. They are wild animals. They just come to food put out for them by the lodge. So that was another bonus, really, to see these. And another couple of water birds to finish with. This is the Plumbeus ibis with this lovely long beak and very common waterside bird. And these birds, which live up to their name of southern screamer, these two were just stood on a bush here screaming for all they were worth with these spikes on the corner of their wings here, very primitive looking birds. But just to finish, just to say, that it was such a wonderful experience, and I can't recommend it highly enough to you. But if you're into astrophotography, there's virtually no light pollution in this part of the world at all. And this is a picture of the Milky Way I took from my balcony on the Flotel before coming home. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for listening.